I will never forget the chill of that morning, the kind that seeps under your skin and stays there, even when the sun is shining. David's truck slowed to a stop on the edge of a gravel driveway, its tires crunching over weeds that had long since claimed the path. He stepped out, slammed the door, and for a moment just stood there, hands on his hips, staring at the house like it was some burden he'd been forced to carry. "This is it," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. The house belonged to my grandmother, a place I hadn't visited in years. The porch sagged in places, paint peeled like the scales of an old snake, and vines crawled up one side as if trying to pull the place back into the earth. It was where I was supposed to spend the rest of my life, or at least the year I had left, according to him and his mother. I sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched in my lap, legs stiff. My body still hadn't fully recovered from the mild stroke, and walking was difficult. I could move, just slower than before, but Carol, my mother-in-law, had convinced him I was better off somewhere quiet. A place where, in her words, Emily can rest. And when it's her time, it'll be peaceful. That's how she said it. When it's her time. Like I was already gone. David came around to my door, opened it, and leaned down, his expression caught between pity and irritation. "You'll be comfortable here. There's someone to check in on you, and the air's cleaner than the city. It'll be good for your heart." Good for my heart? My heart was breaking right there in that driveway. I glanced at the person leaning against the porch railing, a woman in her late 50s, heavy-set, wearing a shirt stained with something I didn't want to guess. Her hair was stringy, her eyes bleary, even in daylight. She gave me a half-hearted wave, then lit a cigarette and turned away. "That's Janet," David said. "She'll be your caretaker. I'll pay her every month." Out of my inheritance money, I thought but didn't say. He lowered the wheelchair from the back of the truck and set it on the ground, then turned to me. "Come on, Emily. Let's get you settled." Settled, like I was a piece of furniture being moved into storage. I sat there, frozen. My fingers gripped the doorframe, my pulse hammering. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. But what was I supposed to do? My body still trembled when I stood too long. My voice still cracked when I tried to argue. I had trusted him for years, and now that trust was being used to exile me. David finally bent down, scooped me up like I weighed nothing, and placed me in the chair. My face burned, not from embarrassment, but from rage I couldn't voice. Janet stubbed out her cigarette, opened the door, and disappeared inside, muttering something about finding the spare room. David pushed me across the porch and into the house. The air smelled like dust and old wood with a hint of mildew. The walls were bare except for a few hooks where pictures must have hung years ago. "I'll check in every couple of weeks," David said as he carried my bags in. "Janet will handle the day-to-day. You won't have to worry about a thing." A thing. As though I was incapable of thought, incapable of feeling. When he finally stepped back outside, I wheeled myself to the window. He stood by his truck, fiddling with something on his phone, then glanced at the house one last time. His face didn't look guilty, just relieved. He waved awkwardly, climbed into the cab, and drove off without looking back. I stayed by that window long after the sound of the engine faded, my fingers gripping the armrest so tightly my knuckles whitened. For the first time in years, I felt something sharp cut through the numbness. Anger, bright and alive. And under that anger, something else stirred. Something I hadn't felt since before the stroke. Strength. I used to believe I'd chosen the safe man. The one who wouldn't hurt me, who wouldn't gamble away our savings or disappear into some midlife crisis. David was gentle when we first met, soft-spoken, attentive, the kind of man who opened doors and remembered coffee orders. I was 25, working as an assistant to the CEO of a logistics firm, running on ambition and caffeine, dreaming of one day starting my own business. He sold insurance, steady, reliable, ordinary. That's what I thought I needed. Our wedding was small, intimate, with wildflowers and folding chairs set up in Carol's backyard. She cried as she hugged me, calling me her daughter now. I believed her. I believed everything back then. For the first few years, it wasn't bad. David would bring home takeout on nights I worked late, rub my shoulders when I sat hunched over my laptop. Carol, though, never hid her disapproval. She'd tut whenever I mentioned work projects, saying things like, "You don't want to wear yourself down before kids, dear." She liked things her way. Home-cooked meals at 6 sharp, Sunday lunches after church, and her son always just one phone call away. When I landed a major contract at work and mentioned maybe applying for a promotion, Carol's smile froze. Later that night, David told me, "Maybe slow down a little. Mom worries about you." I laughed it off, but it stung. Years passed. My dreams quietly shifted to the background while his life stayed exactly the same, until the letter arrived. It came from Germany, a neat white envelope with my name handwritten on the front. Inside was the news. My grandmother had passed, leaving me a portion of her estate, a significant sum of money and a small old property she'd once mentioned, but I'd never seen. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the letter, my hand shaking. "Dave, what's wrong?" David asked, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. I inherited something," I whispered. When he read the letter, his eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. He hugged me so tightly I almost cried from relief. For one brief moment, I thought, maybe this will fix everything. Maybe we'll finally build the life we dreamed of. Carol brought over champagne that night, hugging me, calling me her lucky girl. The next few weeks, their attitude shifted. Carol stopped criticizing my late work hours. David came home earlier, cooked dinners, lit candles like we were dating again. I wanted to believe it was love, but deep down, something didn't feel right. The first time I saw him with her, it didn't register. I'd gone shopping for a gift, a new tie for David because he'd been dressing sharper lately, and as I stepped out of the boutique, I spotted him across the street. He was laughing, his hand brushing the arm of a young woman with long auburn hair. When she leaned up to kiss him, my whole body froze. My heart didn't shatter right then. It cracked, just a tiny crack. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. A week later, I sat in a dingy office as the investigator slid photos across the desk. David and the same woman. Her name was Lily, having dinner, holding hands in a park, checking into a hotel. The report included transcripts from conversations. I'll never forget reading one line. "Once Emily's money comes through, I can finally open my own business. We'll be set, Lily. I promise. She won't need it for long anyway. Not with her health the way it is." He was already planning my exit. That was the night I called Tatiana, my college roommate and one of the few people I still trusted. She listened quietly as I poured everything out. About the affair, the inheritance, the way Carol looked at me like I was temporary. When I finally fell silent, Tatiana said, "You need to think about what's next, Em. You can't stay with someone who's already erasing you." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break down right there on my kitchen floor. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the photos, numb. A month later, the stroke hit. I was at work, going over contracts, when my vision blurred and the left side of my body went weak. I woke up in the hospital with David holding my hand and Carol hovering nearby, tears in her eyes. "You're going to be okay," David whispered, brushing hair from my face. "We'll take care of you." Take care of me. Those words replayed in my head for weeks. I thought it was love at first. I thought he meant it. But as my recovery dragged on, I started noticing things. He stayed later at work. Carol took over managing my medications, my food, my schedule. They whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, words like home care and quiet place. And then one morning, David told me he had an idea, a fresh start at my grandmother's old property, a place where I could heal in peace. Heal? No, that wasn't what he meant. He was preparing me to disappear. The day we drove out there, I didn't cry. I'd already shed every tear I had left. But sitting in that truck, watching him unload my bags, I made a silent promise. You may have written me off, David, but I am far from finished. When David's truck disappeared down the dirt road, silence settled over everything. Even the wind seemed to pause, as though the world itself was holding its breath. I sat there in that old wheelchair, staring at the screen door Janet had left swinging open, creaking on its rusted hinges. The house was colder than I remembered from childhood summers, a hollow space with dust dancing in the slant of light coming through the windows. I could smell mildew and something faintly sour, like a refrigerator left unplugged too long. This was where they thought I'd fade away quietly, where I was supposed to spend the last of my strength waiting for an end I hadn't asked for. Janet shuffled out of one of the back rooms, scratching her neck. Bedrooms cleared, she said flatly. Sheets are clean enough. Bathrooms down the hall. Don't expect me here every day. I'll check in when I can. Her eyes slid past me, already uninterested. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to shout that I wasn't dying, that I wasn't weak, that I didn't need any of this. But the words stuck in my throat, tight with anger and something deeper. Betrayal so heavy it weighed on my chest. She grabbed her coat and left, muttering something about picking up groceries later. The screen door banged shut behind her, leaving me alone in a house I hadn't chosen. I sat perfectly still for what felt like forever, staring at my hands gripping the armrests. They trembled, not from weakness this time, but from fury. A soft laugh escaped me, bitter and low, because suddenly it all felt absurd. My husband, my mother-in-law, this so-called caretaker. None of them saw me anymore. They saw a burden, a bank account, and a problem they didn't want to solve. That was the moment I decided I would stop being their problem. I stood up. Slowly, carefully, but I stood. My legs wobbled, stiff from weeks of limited use, yet they held. I took one shaky step, then another, until I was standing in the center of the living room, breathing hard, heart pounding. The truth was, I'd been recovering better than I let on. The physical therapy had worked, the weakness had eased. I could walk short distances without help, but I'd never told David or Carol. Why? Because I needed to know the truth, what they'd do if they thought I couldn't fight back. And they showed me they abandoned me. I laughed again, this time louder. It startled me. It sounded like someone else's voice, fierce and defiant. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person I trusted. Tatiana. My voice cracked, but it carried something new, resolve. On the other end, she gasped. Emily? Where are you? I've been calling, texting. David said you were. Oh my God, are you okay? I'm fine, I said, though my throat tightened around the lie. He left me at Grandma's old place. Said it's good for my heart. Tatiana cursed under her breath, then exhaled sharply. I'm coming. Tonight. Don't you dare move anything heavy, you hear me? When the call ended, I looked around at the peeling wallpaper and broken blinds. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt dangerous. I spent the next few hours exploring every inch of the house. The kitchen was bare except for a few dented pans and dusty jars. The bedroom had a sagging mattress but solid walls. The porch leaned, but it stood. Everything was salvageable. By the time headlights cut across the window, I'd already made a list of repairs in my head. Tatiana burst in, still in her work clothes, eyes wide with fury and worry. They left you here alone? She demanded. With her. Janet? Yeah. She's a delight, I said dryly. Tatiana didn't laugh. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes scanning from my face to my legs. You're standing. I am standing, I confirmed. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, small, fierce. So, what's the plan? The plan. Until that moment, I hadn't thought beyond surviving the night. But now I could see the threads of something bigger. I'm not going back, I said. Not to him, not to her. This is my house now, Tatiana. My life. And I'm going to rebuild it. She nodded slowly, pulling a folded toolkit from her bag. Then let's start with the locks. If David shows up again, he's knocking first. We spent hours cleaning, laughing between angry mutters about David and Carol. We fixed the front door, found some old curtains in a closet, and even managed to get the electricity back on in half the house. When we finally collapsed onto the couch, covered in dust and sweat, Tatiana handed me a bottle of water and said, "Emily, you know this isn't just about the house, right?" I nodded, gripping the bottle so hard my knuckles whitened. "I know. It's about everything they tried to take from me, and what I'm taking back." Outside, the wind shifted, warm and soft, carrying the scent of wild grass. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, letting it fill my lungs. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. That night, I slept on that sagging mattress like it was the softest bed in the world because it was mine. My choice. My life. And tomorrow I would start over. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin curtains, dust floating in golden beams like tiny stars. I woke up sore from head to toe, but not in the broken way I had grown used to. This was the soreness of effort, of life returning to my muscles. For once, the pain meant I'd done something good for myself. Tatiana had already left for work, but she'd taped a note to the kitchen cabinet. "You're stronger than you think. Call me when you're ready to hit the hardware store." I smiled, folding it neatly and tucking it into my pocket like a charm. I stepped outside, barefoot on the porch, and really looked at the property for the first time. The land was wild, overgrown, but beautiful in its own way. The air smelled of sun-warmed grass and cedar. For years, I'd rushed through life, work, marriage, obligations. But standing there in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, possibility. The first weeks were hard. I learned quickly that cleaning out an old house is a workout no physical therapist could prepare you for. I scraped mold off tiles, hauled broken furniture out to the yard, patched leaks in the roof with guidance from YouTube videos and sheer stubbornness. My hands blistered, my back ached, but I refused to quit. Every nail I hammered in, every board I sanded down, felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. One morning, as I struggled with an old lawnmower, a pickup truck pulled up. Out stepped Luke Harris, the man whose property bordered mine, a broad-shouldered rancher with weathered hands and eyes the color of storm clouds. "You planning to tame all that with that thing?" he asked, nodding to my mower with an amused smirk. "Got a better idea." I shot back, wiping sweat from my forehead. He grinned, disappearing back to his truck, and returned with a gas-powered trimmer that looked like it could chew through a forest. "I'll handle it. Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood favor." I started to protest, but he was already pulling the starter cord. Within an hour, half the yard was cleared, the knee-high weeds reduced to tidy strips of earth. When he finally cut the engine, he wiped his brow and said, "You need a hand with this place, you call me." It wasn't just him. Word must have spread fast in the small town, because within days people I'd never met started showing up. Mrs. Alvarez from the general store brought pies and paint samples. A retired teacher named Martha offered to help me catalog the old books I found in the attic. Even Sheriff Daniels stopped by one afternoon, just to check if I needed new locks installed. At first, I kept waiting for someone to ask for something in return, but no one did. They just showed up, helped, smiled, left me little pieces of kindness I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Luke came by the most often. Sometimes he fixed things, replacing broken window panes, patching the sagging porch steps. But sometimes he just sat on the porch with me, sipping sweet tea and talking about life on his ranch. He'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago, he told me quietly one evening, and the ranch had been his way of staying sane. "I know what it's like," he said, his voice low, "to wake up and feel like half your life's gone." I didn't say anything. I just reached over and rested my hand on his. We stayed like that for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees. With the house slowly becoming livable, I turned to the land. I started a small garden, awkwardly at first, but soon with more confidence. Luke showed me how to build raised beds, how to compost, how to tell good soil from bad. There was something grounding about digging my hands into the earth, watching new life push through. One Saturday, the town held a farmer's market, and Luke convinced me to bring some of my vegetables. Just a small basket of tomatoes and peppers. I felt shy, almost foolish, but people bought everything within an hour. Mrs. Alvarez clapped her hands and said, "Honey, you keep growing like this. You'll have a stall here every month." That night, as I counted the few bills I'd earned, I realized it wasn't about the money. It was about being part of something again, something bigger than my pain or my past. The nightmares about David and Carol still came sometimes, waking me in the dark, heart pounding. But now I had an anchor. I had people who saw me as Emily, not as a burden or a fading shadow. I had work that made me sweat for myself, not for someone else's dreams. And quietly, gently, something else bloomed. I started looking forward to Luke's visits, to the way he'd lean in the doorway with that easy smile, or how his laugh rumbled low in his chest when I made a joke. He never pushed, never pried, just showed up, steady as sunrise. For the first time since the stroke, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I could build, what I would build. By late summer, the house didn't feel like a graveyard anymore. It felt like mine. The walls were repainted, the leaky roof fixed, and the smell of mildew had been replaced with warm cedar and the faint sweetness of fresh bread I'd learned to bake. I had blisters on my hands and muscles I didn't know existed, but every ache was proof that I was rebuilding, not just a house, but a life. It was Luke who planted the idea that changed everything. One evening, after helping me install a rainwater collection barrel, he leaned against the porch railing and said, "You ever think about doing more with this place? It's good land. Could be more than just a home." I frowned. More like what? He shrugged. "You've already got that garden. You've got neighbors buying up every tomato you can grow. What if you did it bigger? Organic produce, maybe a little farm stand. People around here love supporting local." At first, I laughed. I was just a woman who'd been left for dead and was learning how to stand on her own again. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had money from the inheritance. Money David had wanted so badly to control. What if I used it for me? The next morning, I made calls to a local carpenter for building raised beds, to a feed store for soil and compost, and to the county office about small agricultural permits. By the end of the week, my little side garden had grown into rows of neatly planted beds, and a small greenhouse Luke helped me construct from reclaimed wood and clear sheeting. It was hard work, but it filled me with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Every day I woke up, stretched sore muscles, and went outside to tend plants that were slowly transforming bare dirt into green life. My hands smelled like earth, my clothes like sun and sweat, and I loved it. When the first real harvest came, peppers, tomatoes, lettuce, and herbs, I loaded up Luke's truck and drove to the farmer's market. I expected to sell a little, maybe earn enough to cover seed costs. Instead, by noon, everything was gone. People asked if I'd be back next week, and one local chef even handed me his card, saying he wanted to buy from me regularly. Driving back home, wind in my hair, I realized I was smiling so hard it hurt. Luke was waiting when I pulled up. "Sold out?" he asked, his grin already knowing the answer. "Everything," I said, holding up the empty crates. "That's how it starts," he said, leaning against the truck. "Next thing you know, you're running the whole show." I laughed, but deep inside, something shifted. For so long, I defined myself as someone's wife, someone's burden. Now, I was Emily Whitaker, the woman building her own business, her own future. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Luke and I changed too. It wasn't sudden. No dramatic first kiss under fireworks. It was quiet moments. Him showing me how to repair an irrigation hose, me baking him a peach cobbler and laughing as he insisted it was the best thing he'd ever eaten. One night, After we finished setting up a new trellis, he stayed longer than usual, sitting on the porch while crickets sang in the distance. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked softly. "Next?" I looked at him. He nodded. "You've been through hell, Emily. But you're different now. Stronger. You got plans beyond this farm stand." I hesitated, then smiled. I just want to keep building. This place. My life. Something that's mine." Luke looked at me for a long moment, then reached over and took my hand. His was rough, warm, steady. "That's a good plan." I didn't pull away. For the first time in years, someone touched me not because they had to or out of pity, but because they wanted to be near me. It felt simple, natural, and safe. From then on, Luke became more than just a neighbor. He became part of the routine, hauling soil, helping fix tools, eating dinners at my kitchen table. He didn't push, didn't rush, just stayed present, steady as the sunrise. By early fall, we had more than a farm stand. We had a name, Whitaker Gardens, and even a small logo Tatiana designed. Orders came in faster than I could keep up with, and Luke suggested hiring a teenager from town to help with harvest. When I handed that first paycheck to a high school kid saving for college, I almost cried. I was helping someone else now. That night, sitting on the porch, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, weak, scared, abandoned. And then I thought about the woman I was becoming, independent, capable, and happy. Happy. That was the word I hadn't dared to use for so long. I glanced at Luke, who was sipping iced tea, his profile lit by the porch light. He caught me looking and smiled, slow, warm, patient. My chest tightened, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something like hope. And for the first time, I let myself think it. Maybe love isn't gone forever. Maybe it just needed to find me when I was finally ready. It was almost a year to the day since David left me at that old house when his truck rolled up the gravel drive again. I was kneeling by the garden, hands deep in the soil, when I heard the low rumble of the engine. For a split second, my heart clenched, muscle memory from years of shrinking whenever he came home angry. But then I stood, wiping dirt on my jeans, and waited. David stepped out, wearing the same brand of sunglasses, the same smug half-smile. "Emily," he said like we were still married, still close. "You look great." His eyes scanned the greenhouse, the freshly painted porch, the neat rows of vegetables. "You've been busy." I didn't smile. "What do you want, David?" He glanced at the farmhouse and the land beyond. "We need to talk about the inheritance, about how it should be divided." I laughed, not bitterly, but genuinely, because it was so ridiculous. "Divided? You mean the inheritance you tried to control after you cheated on me? The one you left me here to die for?" He flinched, just slightly, but covered it with a smirk. "Come on, Em. I made mistakes, but we were married. Legally, I'm entitled to—" Nothing, a voice cut in. Luke stepped up from behind the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His presence was steady, grounding. "You left her, David. You abandoned her when she needed you. That doesn't earn you a penny." David bristled. "And who are you? The new boyfriend? Congratulations. Enjoy your charity case." Luke didn't flinch, but I stepped forward before he could say more. "Stop." My voice was calm, even. "You don't get to call me that anymore. You don't get to call me anything." He tried to step closer, lowering his voice as if we were sharing a secret. "Look, I know things got messy, but you can't seriously think. I don't think anything about you anymore, David." The words came out sharper than I expected, but I didn't pull them back. "You left me here because it was easier than loving me through a hard time. You lied, you cheated, and you planned your life with someone else while I was fighting to stand again. I don't hate you for it. I don't even wish you harm. But you're not part of my life anymore, and you're not touching a dime of what I built." For a long moment, there was silence except for the wind moving through the trees. David's mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Luke stepped beside me, one arm brushing mine, not claiming, just steady. You heard her. Time to go. David's face tightened, but he turned, muttering under his breath as he climbed back into his truck. The engine roared, dust kicking up behind him as he drove away, smaller and smaller until he disappeared down the road. Just like the last time. Only this time, I wasn't left behind. I was standing my ground. I exhaled slowly, realizing my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from release. Luke touched my shoulder gently. You okay? I nodded. Better than okay. I looked at him, at the house, at the land around us. I'm free. He smiled, small and quiet, like he knew what those words really meant. Come on, he said softly. Let's get these seedlings in before the sun sets. That evening, we worked side by side, hands in the soil, laughter breaking up the hum of crickets and the distant calls of birds heading home. When we finished, Luke leaned on his shovel and looked at me in the soft glow of dusk. You've come a long way, Emily. I smiled, brushing dirt from my cheek. Yeah, and I'm not done yet. We sat on the porch after dinner, sipping iced tea while the sky turned pink and gold. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Luke reached over, threading his fingers through mine. I didn't pull away. It wasn't fireworks or whirlwind passion. It was something deeper. Something patient, rooted, like the life I was building. A month later, Whitaker Gardens hosted its first community day. Families came with kids running through rows of vegetables, neighbors sampling homemade jam, and local musicians playing under the shade of old oak trees. I stood near the entrance, greeting people, laughing when one little girl tugged my sleeve to show me the pumpkin she'd picked herself. Tatiana caught me in a quiet moment and hugged me tight. Look at you, she whispered. Look what you built. I looked around, at the laughter, the music, the sunlight glinting off the greenhouse, and at Luke, standing by the lemonade stand with a soft smile meant only for me. For the first time, I felt whole. Not because I had taken revenge or proved someone wrong, but because I had chosen me. I had chosen healing over hate, roots over running, love over fear. And as the day wound down, I stood at the edge of my land, breathing in the scent of earth and growth, and whispered to myself, this is home. This is my life, and it's beautiful.